So good afternoon all. Thank you for joining us in the e-forum of the e-mobility infrastructure, business readiness strategies and green jobs creation. The Bengal Chamber is presenting to you in partnership with the British Deputy High Commission in Kolkata. And we are thankful to RPG Power Trading Company to sponsor us and helping us to mount this program. I would request our chairperson of the Energy and Environment Committee and Vice President of the Chamber, Mr. Gautam Ray, to take the session forward. I would just mention the names of the speakers who are in the opening session with us. Apart from Mr. Gautam Ray, we have our President, Mr. Devi Mukherjee, Mr. Nick Lowe, British Deputy High Commissioner in Kolkata, Ms. Hannah Fenner, Public Affairs Manager, the London Electric Vehicle Company, or LEVC, Mr. Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer of Mahindra Group, and Ms. Hoimondri Poddar, our colleague whom we work very closely, the Senior Energy, Climate Change and Urban Advisor, COP26 Zero Emission Vehicles Transition, India-led Prosperity Team, UK Trade, Economics and Prosperity. We are expecting Mr. Rajanveer Singh Kapoor, who is the Managing Director of West Bengal Transport Corporation. He is in Gangashagar now, and his helicopter will be landing in Kolkata, say around 4:45, and he will be joining accordingly. So we will let the chairperson of the session know when Mr. Rajanveer Singh joins. And now I would request Mr. Gautam Ray to take the session forward. Just a take brief for all, we are keeping the access to mic off and on with the speakers and screen sharing, right? And rest of the audience would be kept on mute for ease of the proceedings. You can share your feedback and your questions on the chat board. To Mr. Gautam Ray, please.
Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. This very contextual and relevant topic, e-mobility, on which Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry is actively participating since long. And I would say Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry is one of the pioneers in promoting the e-mobility in the country. In fact, mobility, all of us know, is the driver for human civilization. All through the civilization, if we go through, starting from the invention of steam engine, then locomotive, then IC, and all the vehicles, what we observe today, this motion in particular is the most important prime mover for the advancement of human civilization. Naturally, e-vehicle is the latest form of it which has been discussed. And we all of us know that the ultimate success will lie on the storage. With the invention of lithium ion battery and its use, the e-vehicle and its whole business module and the viability has become more competitive. And a country like India, where we have so much of dependence on imported fuel, it is more relevant. As we know that manufacturers, even international manufacturers and the national level also, they are more or less ready. Of huge range of variety of, efficiency as well as the price structure. But like a chicken and the egg issue, we all are now discussing on the infrastructure, particularly with respect to the charging facility. Now, which is the priority? Charging facility as well as the promotion of the e-vehicles. That is the discussion points. In fact, along with many other salient points, what probably we will have a fruitful deliberation today. But one thing I would mention just before I would formally initiate the program, that society with the invention of the technology and its availability in hand, society sometimes take root on its own. Like we have been talking so much about the e-vehicle, but if we see today in the particularly the cities, in the little bit of, the remote areas where huge number of e-vehicles in the form of e-rickshaw, and that is flying. So it doesn't require any macro level planning that how really they are going to take the route. So when there is a convenience, both with respect to cost, with respect to technology, with respect to ease of making it happen, people at large take that as a alternative. So that is the glaring example what we see. But unless we can make some protocol, some system, some process in it, and more importantly, the infrastructure and the policy, which includes the tariff-related issues, the the way it should take place, the way it can be dovetailed in our overall development plan, that may be little bit of we can be falling short of it. So today's deliberation, we will listen to many eminent speakers all across the world, and we are grateful to British Deputy High Commission Kolkata for being associated with us in this event. And with this, I would request Mr. Deve Mukherjee, the President, the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry, who personally I know, apart from his position as the President, who is one of the pioneer, one of the major, initiator in environmental issues. I would request Mr. Mukherjee to give his welcome address.
Thank you very much, Gautam, for your very kind words. And I take this opportunity to join Mr. Gautam Ray, our Vice President and Chairman of the Energy and Environment Committee, to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to this afternoon's deliberations on e-mobility, infrastructure, business readiness, strategies, and green jobs creation. I understand this is a precursor to the 14th Annual Energy and Environment Conclave of the Chamber. And indeed, it's heartening to note that the British Deputy High Commission has partnered with us, and we consider it a privilege to be associated with the High Commission in this endeavor. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about e-mobility, we all understand that e-mobility is an integral part of the transition process to a clean transport. Both energy transition and transport transition, clean transport and clean energy, are two focus areas that are being addressed at the COP26 meet later on this year in Glasgow. And both these transition processes, transport and energy, are linked to the other three focus areas as part of the overall vision in terms of the focus of COP26. And those three other aspects are adaptation and resilience in terms of the changing climate scenario, in terms of nature-based solutions, and very importantly, green finance. The short point is all these five aspects are integrally connected. And to my mind, ladies and gentlemen, when we are having any discussion on the climate agenda and any aspect of Sorry, I found that I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah, I find there's a lot of background noise. I don't know how that can be sorted. Anyway, so as I was saying that for any discussion on climate agenda and different aspects of a climate agenda, one necessarily needs to take a very holistic view of the sustainability development goals set out, and they all add up. They are different strands that they all add up to what I would call an inclusive and equitable social order, a resilient and sustainable business ecosystem, and help realize the vision of a common good for all. We, all of us, are passing through a phase of deep anxiety. But this phase has given us an opportunity to reimagine our lifestyle and our work practices. And to my mind, that's a good starting point for a discussion and deliberation on the subject at hand. Bengal Chamber and the British Deputy High Commission have jointly deliberated on the climate agenda and the specific aspects of climate agenda with a specific focus on e-mobility at our last Energy and Environment Conclave. And this event, along with series of forthcoming events, would help us move towards COP26 to review our commitments towards a just and fair and clean transition, and to strengthen our ambitions towards the climate goals. For the readiness in terms of the infrastructure and in embracing e-mobility, proliferating e-mobility, the process gains traction, to my mind, if there is a seamless integration of policy push and market pull. And this is the point I had made at the last Energy and Environment Conclave as well. The demand drive to adopt clean mobility comes out of a need and a response from the community. And that will happen when it becomes a necessity to do something here and now. On the front of green jobs, to my mind, it is an inevitable outcome from developing strong green value chains. And that is something which will necessarily happen if these green value chains come into play. In terms of the context of Kolkata and Bengal, I would like to compliment the government as well as all the stakeholders and the community at large for having successfully embraced e-mobility, and especially in the area of public transport and last mile connectivity. The challenge, however, remains in the space of private transport and long-haul transport. And this is where, to my mind, innovation would play a major role in terms of technology adoption, in terms of designing business models, and of course, the community engagement. Because to make this a preferred choice, we necessarily need to have a bottom-up, a ground-up approach. And I will be a little optimistic to say that the vision of having 30% of transport by way of electric mobility by 2030 during this decade would definitely be a reality. And certainly the city of Kolkata and the state of West Bengal can show the way. We have a host of eminent speakers who would be addressing us this afternoon, and I extend a very warm welcome to all of them, and a very, very special welcome to His Excellency, Mr. Nick Lowe. Nick, a warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for having graced this occasion with your presence, and we look forward to hearing your views on the readiness and on what we should do in order to make e-mobility a success. We all keenly look forward to an afternoon's deliberations, and I'm sure we will have significant takeaways, which we will package together and link it up to the future events that will all add up to a very, very convincing narrative, which we hope to present at COP26. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the proceedings.
And as we prepare the stage for Mr. Nick Lowe, we'll have a look at a short video of COP26.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. And we have seen a short video on COP26 too. I would now request Mr. Nick Lowe, British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata, delivering his introductory address and setting the tone of the event, actually.
Mr. Ray, thank you very much indeed. Can I just check, can you see and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you too.
You can do, thank you. Okay, I've taken my life in my hands this afternoon. I'm sharing a house with my two children, both of whom, as I speak, have online lessons where they're required to have their cameras on. I think my home Wi-Fi is stressed. If at any point you have problems hearing me, please say I will turn the camera off. Namaskar, namaste, assalamu alaikum. A very good afternoon to all of you. Mr. Ray, our old friend Deb, thank you very much indeed. I'm indebted to them for bringing us together this afternoon. Today we discuss how to up our game on clean transport, which clearly is an absolutely critical challenge to address the threat of climate change. Now, for road transport, the promise of cheaper and of clean technology is not only real, it's here. We hope, indeed we expect our roads in the United Kingdom, in India, and all around the world to look and indeed to sound very different by the end of this decade. Electric vehicles are already cheaper to run than fossil fuel cars, and they're expected to be cheaper to buy within the next few years. But even by the most optimistic estimates, only half of new car sales globally will be electric by 2040, and to double that pace of transition. Well, we're committed to working together to achieve this, and we believe we can do that if we work together. Now, as Mukherjee has said, the UK will be hosting the United Nations COP26 Climate Summit in November this year. And as COP26 President, we are bringing together the international community to make progress in those 5 critical areas: clean transport, clean energy, adaptation and resilience, finance, and nature-based solutions. And we're taking steps domestically and internationally in all of these areas. These are not and or. To protect the future of our planet, we need to make early, substantive progress across the board. Well, what's happening in the UK in electric mobility? I tell you this, not to blow our own trumpet, although I think we've got a very good story to tell. I grew up in a country that had a reputation as being the dirty man of Europe. Now we are Europe's leaders on this agenda. And I think that's really important, that however difficult it seems, it shows you can make real change with the political will to do so. And we've got big changes in the UK. In November, our Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced an end to the sale of new petrol and diesel cars in the United Kingdom by 2030. Now that puts us well on track to be the fastest G7 country to decarbonize cars and vans. From 2035, all new cars and vans must be zero emission at the tailpipe. And between 2030 and 2035, any new cars and vans sold that emit the tailpipe must have significant zero emission capability, i.e. they've got to be plug-in or they've got to be full hybrids. Now that move is underpinned by over £2.8 billion in British government funding to support a greater uptake of zero-emission vehicles and to put us at the forefront of the design, the development and the manufacturing of zero-emission vehicles. We'll also provide £500 million in research and development and ensure there's up to £1 billion in capital support to drive the electrification of the UK automotive sector. Highways England will provide local authorities in England with £9.3 million to encourage businesses to switch to electric vehicles. We're going to do that by allowing businesses to try electric vehicles for free before they buy. And we're convinced that will persuade them to go down the electric route. We also have a number of Go ultra-low cities in the United Kingdom, which are fast integrating electric mobility within their transportation systems. And that's got off to a very good start. Our Office of Zero Emission Vehicles is working with industry to increase confidence in the charging network and to reduce what is widely referred to as range anxiety. That's the fear that a vehicle's got insufficient range to reach its destination. Great innovation is taking place across the entire electric vehicle ecosystem. Batteries, smart electric buses, charging infrastructure, powertrains, vehicle-to-grid solutions, and so on. So what are we doing at the international level? Well, we're creating new forums for international collaboration. The Zero Emission Vehicle Transition Council, set up by the United Kingdom, is supporting and accelerating that global transition to clean transport. We were absolutely delighted to have Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Javadekar, at the first meeting in November last year. Let's turn to how we're working with the Indian authorities. India, you don't need me to tell you, is moving steadily towards a shared, connected, electric transportation system. It is a great foundation, strong commitment, suitable environment to develop its EV ecosystem further. The United Kingdom and India are exchanging knowledge and collaborating on accelerating transition to zero-emission vehicles through a wide range of technical partnership programs with the National Institute for Transforming India, IORG, ministries from all across the government of India, and with state and city governments. There is nowhere is that more the case than in West Bengal and Kolkata, and I'll touch on that briefly. Top electric vehicle companies from the United Kingdom, such as EO Charging, Sayeta Powertrain, AMTE, Faradian, the next generation battery solutions company, have either established a presence in India or are expanding their business here. Today, you'll hear from one of the United Kingdom's top EV companies that really is in the forefront of the production of electrically driven vehicles for the commercial sector, including passenger transport, business operations. That is London EV Company Limited, LEVC, which is leading the transformation in eliminating vehicle emissions. Through the use of the latest electric drivetrain technology and advanced materials, the iconic traditional black cab, yes, referred to around the world as a London taxi, is going green. Let's take a little look about what we're doing in West Bengal, because it's really important and exciting too. Mobility, as we know, is evolving. India's embracing the challenge, and all over India, we see cities and businesses leading that change. The government of West Bengal has already undertaken several initiatives on electric mobility that are truly pioneers in India, and it's drafted the State Electric Vehicles Policy. Kolkata has been internationally acclaimed by its peers in the C40 for its leadership work amongst Indian cities on electrification of public transportation systems. And we've got UK companies such as Go Zero e-bikes, which has set up its manufacturing hub in West Bengal, and EO Charging, which is already looking to expand its operations in the state. Ahead of COP26, we are committed to working even more closely with Kolkata Municipal Corporation, Government of West Bengal, in initiatives to accelerate statewide adoption of electric mobility and to bring in innovative strategies that can draw on our experience and the lessons we've learned in the UK, innovative technologies and schemes to enhance the pace of transition, creating greener jobs and cleaner air. I now want to quickly say a thing about business, because today I really do want to urge businesses to join in making progress in these vital areas. Many of you I know have already done so. For those who haven't, you can do so by signing up to the EV100 initiative by the Climate Group, and you'll hear more from them today, by committing to swap polluting vehicles for electric. It's not only good for the planet, believe me, it's very good for the planet, but it's great for business too. In 2018, Anand Mahindra told the World Economic Forum, everything that our group of companies has done to try to improve energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions has given us a return. And today we have Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer for Mahindra Group, and Ms. Hannah Fyfe from the London Electric Vehicle Company with us. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from them to set out their case from business, and indeed the case for business. I also urge all businesses and investors to sign up to the Race to Zero campaign and commit to zero emissions by 2050. Please join the 1,400 businesses and 74 investors who are already on board. And they include Mahindra Heavy Engines, JSW Energy, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Let me conclude by saying the stakes are very high. The world is at a tipping point. If the global community doesn't take action now, decisive action now, we're going to do irreparable damage to our planet. In developing effective vaccines for SARS-CoV-2 in record time, and in a time no one would have thought possible a year ago, the international community has shown the power of common purpose and collective action. The United Kingdom and India, through Oxford University, AstraZeneca, and Serum Institute of India, have been at the forefront of that effort. We, the United Kingdom and India, working with the broader global community, can do the same with climate change. A cleaner, a greener, a healthier, and a more prosperous world is possible. There is no more cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. In your introductory address, you have really gone through the way the UK is moving fast in promoting this e-vehicle, and also you have correctly mentioned about that the basic task what is required is the political will. And as there is a definite program and target for converting all the vehicles, all I mean the transport thing, to this e form, within time frame of 2030, 2035 as we are speaking, and with the zero emission target, that is really give a way forward how things should move. There have been a huge investment also planned. You have correctly mentioned about the necessity of research and the innovation, and also invited for investment in this particular respect. You mentioned about because nothing can emerge without proper collaboration. So, knowledge collaboration between the countries, and particularly the way things are happening in West Bengal, you are finding a hope and lot of optimism is there in your introductory speech. Thank you, Nick. And the decisive action, the way you have concluded, the decisive action with optimism is the real flavor in which direction the society at large should move so that we can see a zero emission and a future which will be much more sustainable for the future generation. That's probably our task today. Thank you, Nick. Thank you again. Uh, we are waiting for Rajanvir Singh Kumar. As you know, he will be joining at any point of time. Meanwhile, we have with us today the Public Affairs Manager, the London Electric Vehicle Company, Mrs. Hannah Fenner, and probably we will listen from the actual field what is happening, and so I would request Hannah to speak on the strategies and what are the new age electric cars and vans you are thinking of. Thank you. Please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me today as well. So I'm Hannah Finer, I'm the Public Affairs Manager for LEVC, so the London Electric Vehicle Company. We're more commonly known as LEVC. So I'll give you a bit of an introduction to our company, our business, where we've come from and our journey very quickly. And then I'll go into a bit more about strategies, challenges and solutions to electrification and decarbonisation for electric vehicles. So very quickly, an introduction to LEVC. So in one way, shape or form, we've been around for over 100 years, manufacturing, as Nick said, the famous London black taxi. We were actually bought by our current parent company, Geely, in 2013. And what that's really meant for the business is that we've seen over £500 million worth of investment since then. And we're now Geely's main research and development base for EV technologies in the UK. And what that really means is we have an absolutely fantastic, brand new, state-of-the-art factory in Coventry near Birmingham in the UK. It's the first purpose-built dedicated electric vehicle factory in the UK, and that's something we're extremely proud of. And we actually have a capacity of up to 20,000 vehicles a year. So although we're only producing a portion of those at the moment, we expect to see very high demand for commercial electric vehicles across the next couple of years, and we hope to be able to fulfill that 20,000 number. So as many of you know, we launched our electric black taxi in 2018, and there's now over 3,500 of these in London. And I like to say, or maybe joke, that our technology in that vehicle has been tested in one of the hardest, most robust markets in the world, and that's the London black cab trade. And that technology has been so successful, the taxi drivers love it so much, the flexibility it gives them, whilst also saving money, whilst also reducing emissions. We've actually used exactly the same technology and put it in an electric van, which went into production in November 2020, so last year. So despite all the challenges of COVID last year, we've gone into production with that electric van, and we expect to see large growth from that product over the next couple of years. So that's a brief introduction. So I'll go on to, before going on to strategies and solutions, I thought I'd outline some of the challenges that we see with electrification at the moment, and why we think, what we think needs to be the solution to those challenges. So the first one, again, as Nick mentioned, that we see a lot of consumer anxiety around electric vehicles at the moment. So that's in relation to both the price of electric vehicles and also infrastructure, so range anxiety. So whatever your opinion is on electric vehicles, in order to get a mass switch over to electric, infrastructure is going to have to be expanded. There's no argument with that. And obviously something that policymakers are battling with at the moment is, well, what's the point of installing infrastructure now if ranges are going to be, 500 miles in 5 years time or 10 years time? I think we're gonna look at ranges on electric vehicles like we look at mobile phones now. 20 years ago, they were a bit bulky, and now we've got a computer in our pocket. I think the innovation we're going to see over the next 5-10 years is going to be massive, but that doesn't remove the infrastructure need today. And in addition, there is still the massive barrier to overcome about price parity. So electric vehicles are currently more expensive than their diesel and petrol counterparts, and that is something that's going to have to be overcome. So I'll come back to these points when I talk about the solutions, but moving on to the second area that I think is quite a challenge at the moment is what we're seeing developing in some countries, which is patchwork regulations. So at the moment, even within countries, we're seeing sort of a mix and match of policies and regulations, which can prove really confusing for the consumer. So if you do take the example of the UK, on a national level, you've got the amazing decision to end the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, but you've only got the electric vehicle grant system guaranteed until 22-23. So there's already a mismatch at national level. And then when you look even further down on a local and regional level, you've got clean air zones already in force. So London's got its own ultra low emission zone, and though that's being expanded in October this year. And then you've got other cities which are still yet to bring in their clean air zones. And all of these different sort of regional regulations have their own criteria. So what that goes to do for consumers, it builds a really confusing picture and prevents them from potentially switching to a cleaner ultra low emission vehicle today, because they mistrust policymakers, they mistrust the journey. They aren't 100% sure that the vehicle they're switching to today won't be outlawed from driving in their local area in a year's time, or they're going to suddenly be hit with a £6 a day charge for driving in their local area. So confusing picture for consumers at the moment. So I'll come back to that second challenge in a minute. And then the third challenge that we're seeing at the moment is a misunderstanding of EV technologies that are out there. I'm not sure how many people on this call know a huge amount about EV technologies, so I'm sorry if I'm telling you things you already know. But as you all know, loads of labels get bandied about. At the moment when I'm watching TV, there's 1,000,001 adverts on for electric vehicles, hybrids, mild hybrids, range extended vehicles, full battery electric. I work in the industry. Sometimes it's confusing for me, so it's going to be confusing for consumers as well that don't have that expertise, that background. This is all really new to them. So taking LEVC vehicles as an example, we're commonly classed as a hybrid technology, but actually there are two key types of hybrids, which are series and parallel hybrids. So the parallel hybrid has a traditional petrol or combustion engine, and the consumer, the driver, can choose which one to drive with the battery or the engine, and that engine actually propels and drives the vehicle forward. Taking a series hybrid, and that's LEVC's vehicles, you've got a vehicle with a battery and a range extender, which is a very small petrol engine which maintains the battery charge in situations where a driver can't get to a charge point. So in an emergency, in a backup situation where they cannot get to a charge point, they can use that range extender to maintain the battery charge until they get there. That small petrol engine, the range extender, it never ever drives the vehicle, and is a really, really clean technology which provides flexibility for commercial operators especially to switch to a super environmentally friendly vehicle today whilst infrastructure is still being expanded. And even when you use the range extender, it produces maybe only 10% of the CO2 emissions emitted by a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing at the moment. So I'll quickly set LEVC as an electric vehicle manufacturer thinks of some of the strategies and solutions to those. So we talked about consumer anxiety earlier. One of those is range anxiety. I think expansion of infrastructure, everyone always talks about it, but that will be really, really key in overcoming range anxiety, especially for commercial operators. Quite simply, for businesses, time is money. The risk of breakdown and uncertainty is not acceptable. Even, you know, if you're reducing your emissions, if you're meeting other targets, losing on money, you know, you can't switch the two. You have to be able to reduce your emissions and continue your business operations. So that risk is just not acceptable for commercial operators at the moment, the risk of breakdown or uncertainty. We don't manufacture passenger cars, but something that I do know of is for passenger cars that we often come across the argument that, oh, well, only a certain number of journeys are ever over this mileage. That argument's just not cutting through. The reason consumers have a car is for flexibility. They want to have the assurance they can get in their vehicle and drive. They may only go from London to Scotland once a year or once every 3 years, but they still want to be able to do that. So we need that infrastructure to overcome that sort of range anxiety. We will need that to see mass electric vehicle uptake. With regards to vehicle price, we've been really impressed as a manufacturer with the UK government's grant scheme for commercial electric vehicles. So at the moment, you can get a grant for £7,500 to take off the price of your vehicle, of your plug-in taxi. And you can also get up to £8,000 to reduce the price of your electric van as well. So those grants have been really integral to electric vehicle uptake. But what we'd really like to see is a bit of a longer term plan. And I know that's something the government are working on at the moment. They've only ever been guaranteed for a relatively short time. And at the moment, again, have only been guaranteed up to 22, 23. So I think consumers need to have the reassurance that this is a long-term thing. Electric vehicles aren't just something niche and, you know, kooky to invest in over the next 2 years. They really need to see that journey to net zero. And we'd like to see a long-term roadmap with those sort of grant schemes included in that. I mentioned earlier a patchwork of regulations, and what we as a manufacturer would like to see is a really joined up national and regional approach, a solid roadmap to electrification. That patchwork effect is actually quite detrimental to uptake of EVs, and it's actually a really important mechanism, regulations and policy, a really important mechanism of increasing EV uptake. I often liken it to the carrier bag charge in the UK. Unless you force the hand of consumers, they're not going to change their behaviour. As soon as the 10p carrier bag charge was brought in the UK, you suddenly started to see a massive change in behaviour, myself included, no longer being lazy, taking those bags out of the kitchen and taking them to the shop. Obviously, the automotive sector is a little bit different, but one fantastic example is London here, where every newly licensed taxi in London, black taxi, must be electric. Now that's Transport for London, the Mayor of London's decision to bring in those regulations. But like I said, we've now got almost 4,000 electric taxis in London, and lots of other regions in the UK are now thinking along the same lines. It's just taking them some time. So we've seen amazing electric taxi uptake in London, but other places outside of London are being a bit slower. And that just shows how integral and important that regulatory mechanism is in terms of changing behaviour. And then the last thing I'll leave you with today going back to my point about misunderstanding of technologies, and I'll leave you with this, and it's something that a stakeholder said to me last year, and it's stuck in my head ever since, and I hope it sticks in yours today, that this journey, it's not about the jump to full battery now. That is great. That is great if you can get a full battery electric vehicle that meets your needs, especially as a business, especially as a commercial operator. If you can find that, that's great. But more often than not, businesses are coming up against not being able to find a vehicle that meets their needs. So what this journey is about, it's about how many miles can we electrify today? It's about the percentage of miles that we can electrify and how can we grow that over the next 10 years. So there really shouldn't be a perception of series hybrid vehicles as bad or hybrid vehicles as evil and battery electric vehicles as good or, angelic. Both technologies will have their benefits, and it's all about trying to get the consumer into one. Whichever one it is, it's all about reducing those emissions and increasing the percentage of electrified miles. And like I said, specifically for commercial vehicles, the ranges needed today may not exist for another 5-10 years. But what we can do is we can provide that really clean green vehicle today. And one of the ways that we know we can increase that percentage of cleaner, greener vehicles today is making sure that these ultra low emission vehicles aren't excluded from benefit schemes. They receive the same sort of benefits as, decreased import duties as fully electric vehicles, the same sort of financial incentives, which is what the UK grant scheme has at the moment, the sort of same benefits as full battery electric vehicles at this time, whilst we are in our journey to full electric. So I think I'll just leave you with that today, that we see one of the biggest solutions and strategies to electrification in this journey is that ultra low emission technologies should be acknowledged as playing a really, really vital bridging role in the journey to meet net zero with fully electric vehicles. And I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Hannah. It's really, you have mentioned not only about the technology, your organization, but also mentioned about the strategy. 100-year-old organization, having legacy and tradition of working in that organization is a matter of great pride. There is a definite, in spite of having such, pandemic, they have met the target of the production in 2020, as you have mentioned. And the issue is, yes, it is more expensive today, but the more important thing is how a proper combination of regulation and policy takes place. That is extremely important. And it's not the vehicle vis-a-vis infrastructure to be properly planned at the national level, because ultimately it will be on the road. So it has to go to the regional as well as the local level also. How really matching the requirement of local, regional, and then the supply would be. You mentioned about the misunderstanding, little bit of confusion of the technology in a sense of the hybrid one, whether it is a series or a parallel. I liked it. And the backup strategy. Of course, what you have mentioned is the right thing. I would say the most right word is the flexibility. And on the question of pricing also, it is not what exactly the immediate is. It is a long-term plan which will be required. As from you, we understand that 22-23 may be a typical year where we are aiming to achieve many things. I can only say with what you have ended, that it is not the question of good or bad, right or wrong. It is the question of proper, optimized, flexible, and a combination of the best. City of Kolkata, where we are holding this event, has been electrified just after the city of London was electrified. It was, if you go by the history, I believe the way London is progressing on the e-vehicle, city of Kolkata will also not be far behind. we will just follow, if not in the same pace. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, for your real, thought-provoking, excellent speech. I would now request Mr. Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer, Mahindra Group, to deliver his keynote address on EV ecosystem, because ultimately, if we do not have the proper supply chain ready, how can we think of a complete zero emitting clean transport and clean energy, what Mr. Debe Mukherjee has started the discussion with. So, Mr. Ghosh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. It's an honor to be a part of this conversation, and it's quite a challenge to speak to you after Hannah's presentation, which can perhaps be described as electrifying. Through the conversations, you must have picked up that electric vehicles are inevitable. We are only talking about when will they become commonplace. We are no longer talking about if they will become commonplace. And that's the main reason why electric vehicles are inevitable, is because electric vehicles will offer a value proposition which is far superior to an IC engine vehicle. You and I will enjoy driving, will enjoy sitting in an electric vehicle because of the kind of vehicle it is going to be. And therefore, over time, you can expect electric vehicles to become inevitable. We know that they are a little bit more expensive now, but over time, these costs will come down as the costs of batteries go down, and the vehicle price of comparable electric and IC engine vehicles will become very similar. With governments like the UK putting their money behind it, this day will come sooner rather than later. We've seen this happening in other technologies. Solar energy today is common around the world. Germany's effort to scale up solar energy in their country brought prices down for solar panels for all of us. Similarly, India's initiative in LED lights brought prices down for everyone around the world, and today LED lights have become commonplace. Going forward, the effort that governments like UK are putting behind electric vehicles will help scale up the industry, bring costs down, and make electric vehicles inevitable around the world. Actually, electric vehicles are already gaining ground. There were 1 million vehicles on road in 2016, and there are 7.2 million electric vehicles on road now. Here in Kolkata, rickshaws have all become electric. The place where I stay in Salt Lake, there is no rickshaw which does not run on batteries anymore. And the experiments being done in Newtown with electric mobility ecosystem in Kolkata is setting the base for a much greater ecosystem in the coming times. Some use cases of electric vehicles are viable already. When we look at last mile goods transport and we look at shared mobility, electric vehicles are viable already. There are thousands of electric taxis running in Bangalore today, taking people from their place of work to the airport and back. That is a use case that is entirely economically viable. There are many other experiments that are going on in the area of last mile goods transport and shared mobility, because at a certain scale of a little more than 100 or 120 kilometers per day, this use case is profitable already. If you were to travel to Delhi, you can actually hire an electric taxi to travel around the city, and you will not have any problem despite the fact that distances in Delhi are quite large. In recent times, the Mahindra Group has launched a service through its logistics arm called e-delivery, where there is a three-wheeler powered by batteries, which is used for last mile goods transport. So these are all very good signs that some use cases of electric vehicles are viable already, and this will enable other use cases to become viable as time goes on. The transition path for electric vehicles in India is through two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And that's because 80% of the vehicles sold in India are either two-wheelers or three-wheelers. While 1.56 lakh vehicles were sold in India, electric vehicles in 2019, 40 lakh are expected to be sold in 2025. This actually gives us a huge opportunity when we start small. It gives us an opportunity to build up competence in the ecosystem in EV components, right from electric motors to battery packs and even power electronics. It gives us an opportunity for localization, for cost efficiencies, and it creates the possibility of a $5 billion ecosystem in EV industry and EV components going forward here in India. Actually, as we transition through two-wheelers and three-wheelers towards larger electric vehicles, it gives us an opportunity to build on some of India's conventional strengths. We can replicate the success we've had in small cars. We can replicate the success we've had in software development, because as we move into electric vehicles, a large part of the value is actually software. Another very large part of the value is in embedded electronics, another area in which India has developed very rapidly in the recent past. Of course, there will be opportunities in cell chemistry development, cell manufacturing, semiconductor devices, and high voltage connectors, which as of now, we don't do much in India. But as we go from two-wheelers and three-wheelers to larger vehicles, we will have the time to develop competence in this. But we already can leverage the strengths that we have in embedded electronics, in software development, and the success we have in small cars, which we have built up over the last few years. Now, there are many anxieties associated with electric vehicles today, given the current state of technology, and Hannah has explained some of them very, very nicely. There is one where people talk about the life of the battery and therefore wonder whether the cost of the electric vehicle is exorbitant, given that the battery will have to be changed after some time. Well, you know that the Mahindra Group has had electric vehicles running on the road for more than 10 years now. There are vehicles which have covered 200,000 kilometers without having to change their battery. Overall, electric vehicles from the Mahindra stable have covered 230 million kilometers very reliably. It's probably the most reliable vehicle in our entire portfolio. So the life of battery, if I were to buy an electric car today, life of battery will not be an anxiety that I will have. Will I have range anxiety? Yes. Hannah's explained why. Yes, of course, there may be many, many journeys that I can do. Probably going to office and coming back is not going to worry the car at all. But if one wants to take a longer drive, then today there may be issues because along the way it may not be easy to charge batteries. This is what limits the use cases which are economically viable today for people. But we know that in a period of 5 to 7 years' time, the range that vehicles will start doing, once it starts doing 350 kilometers or 400 kilometers on one charge, it'll almost be as good as a fuel tank in most of our cars today. Sometimes people talk about the fact that electric vehicles are not really clean because it uses energy from thermal power plants. Well, there are enough studies to show that given the energy mix today in India, it is already cleaner than IC engine vehicles under some conditions. We don't have the time, so I can't do terms and conditions apply in great detail. But all I wish to leave with you is there are many situations where it is already cleaner. But what is most important is that the mix of energy in the Indian grid is becoming cleaner by the day. And therefore, the vehicles that we run on batteries will also be cleaner by the day when we look at overall emissions. We worry about charging infrastructure. Mr. Ray has already talked about it. It is a chicken and egg situation. Today, if you put chargers out, they're underutilized. But as the population of cars increase, the charging infrastructure will increase. and we will probably never have a problem on trying to charge a vehicle. When I drive electric vehicles in the city of Mumbai, I typically charge them either at office or at home, and I've never had any difficulty in going from anywhere to anywhere in the city as of now. The Mahindra Group has taken an interesting approach towards enabling the country move towards electric mobility. You may know that we acquired a company which had a vehicle called Reva. That vehicle improved and it was called the E2O. Most of the initial electric taxis on Indian streets have been e-Veritos, a vehicle whose platform we inherited from Renault. We ourselves created a goods carrier called e-Supro, and that was the pioneer in electric goods transport in India. But that has now evolved into a three-wheel vehicle called Trio. Trio is in the portfolio of our logistics arm, works for Amazon, works for other e-commerce countries, and it is used extensively for last mile goods transport today. There is the most affordable electric car in the country, the eKUV, but perhaps where we think India will benefit the most at this point in time is by creating electric vehicle platforms for manufacturers to build their cars on. And so we've created a 350 volt MESMA platform. The name of the platform is MESMA. And we expect electric vehicles to be built on this platform and other platforms like this. And companies in India to become solution providers so that these solutions can be used to build cars anywhere around the world. Actually, electrification of vehicles is going to change the way automobiles are made around the world. They will make organizations important who are really not part of the automobile ecosystem earlier. But these are changes we are going to see as we go over time. As I said in the beginning, electric vehicles will become inevitable, and you and I will be using electric vehicles either as taxis or as personal vehicles, or we will see them as goods vehicle in not a very long time later, perhaps 5 to 6 years time, they will be ubiquitous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anirban. You have enlightened us on the recent developments where we are, particularly with respect to the electric vehicle. It is, of course, a value proposition, the way you have started. Expensive is a relative term, in my view, because we need to also count for the total direct and indirect cost while we will be speaking for a price of an item. Charging facility, yes, there is a debate because ultimately the charging source, whether it is from the fossil fuel burning or rightly you have said that how much the solar energy can be utilized for that. There is an ambitious plan for the country to have many more electric vehicles, and rightly said, the rickshaws, particularly the small way transport, the experiment has been successful in Newtown, you have also mentioned. You also mentioned about the e-delivery. It is, of course, a value proposition again. And today's world actually speaking for the total solution. So it's not when we will be think of a strategy of a policy, we have to really speak for a solution in totality. On the overall perspective, we find a very bright future with the technological development happening in electronics and software. You assured that battery life will no more be an anxiety. And I can tell you, take this opportunity that to promote and facilitate, we in CSC, being the service provider on electricity for the whole of city, we have installed the charging station at our own office. And as an experiment and as something to really practice, we have started moving
We will have to unmute you, Mr. Ray.
Continuously on mute. Okay.
No, actually, you were not on mute earlier. There was somebody else speaking, so they tried to mute her and ended up muting you as well.
Thank you, thank you. But now I find that Mr. Rajanbir Singh Kapur, IAS Managing Director, West Bengal Transport Corporation, has joined. We are really privileged to have his presence here because he is one we know from the core of the heart that who is facilitating this process in whole of the state. And if we can have the leader like him with us, we will definitely see the light for a huge crowd of e-vehicle, I will say, the efficient use of e-vehicle in near future to come. So, Mr. Rajendra Singh Kapur, please.
So, very warm good evening to all of you. Gautam, thank you for making me feel important, although we believe completely otherwise. Just came back from the Ganga Sagar inspection. We had gone in the morning, and that's why I got a little delayed in joining my session. I apologize, but there's nothing I could have done about that. To be very frank, I think we have people from the British DHC here, Hemanti, Nick, and people from Keria there, people from various organizations, Bengal chambers. I'll ask a simple question to all of you, not as a bureaucrat, not as an officer, just like a common guy, So whenever you are buying a car, let's assume whether Nick buys it in London or Hemanti buys it in Calcutta, or I buy it here or Delhi or Chandigarh, other than the looks and the entire thing, the most important element that we look for is the mileage. In Hindi, you can say we basically come to ये 1 लीटर में कितने किलोमीटर गाड़ी चलती है. So whatever your economic strata is, whatever your intellectual IQ, whatever you may say, so at that time you never ask whether my car is environmentally, good or bad. So we may have seminars like this, we may have webinars, we may have meetings, but at the end of the day, when all of us personally buy a vehicle, the most important thing we ask is, what is the mileage? If I'm spending X amount of rupees on the fuel, what am I going to get out of it? So I think any policy, any intervention from the government, private sector, other stakeholders can only be materialized into a success if we are able to come up with an infra where the electric vehicles can compete or surpass the fossil fuel vehicles in terms of the cost. Now, you may say it will take time. I agree. It certainly would take time because we are shifting from a paradigm of fuel-based vehicles which have been running from decades, if you see. It's almost so many decades that fossil fuel-based vehicles have taken over in the whole world. But I'm sure that once we reach there, then automatically you'll see people migrating towards an EV. Because the common parlance anywhere in the world, so I don't say this is just Calcutta, anywhere in the world would be, oh, you know what? He bought this EV car and he told me that he's saving $4,000 a month. Or, he's saving about £100 a month or £200 a month or say $500 a month. So anywhere in the world, when any of your friends tell you that, it makes a lot of material sense because the monies that you save on the fuel or on any of the input, you could be using elsewhere. So this could be 5 to 10 years down the line when we actually have a system. Now, till the time we reach that level, let me tell you, Gautam, I heard just one speaker before this, but with all the experience, limited experience I've gained in my portfolio over the last 1 year, yes, we are working on charging infrastructure. Yes, we are working on giving you an apparatus. You would want tax incentives. Somebody will say registration tax waiver kar dijiye. Somebody will say let's get away done. Give some subsidy, give some incentives. I think the biggest thing would be to have an ecosystem. Just putting things on paper, I'm sure we are coming up with a draft EV policy. It's happening in our department and it's revolving around these sort of things, giving SOPs to people so that they can, migrate towards electric vehicles. But I think that is still not the end of the story. The story would end when actually you create an ecosystem wherein everything is interconnected, you know. So let's assume I want to buy an EV vehicle. So the moment I want to buy an EV vehicle, firstly, the awareness of where to buy, when to buy, production facilities that I must have whenever you buy a vehicle, you know, on our mind is post-buying maintenance. हम सब लोग सोचते हैं, we all think, if I buy a vehicle, does it have a lot of workshops? If it gets problematic, where do I go? What is the cost of repairing it? So we have to work on that as well. It's not just about selling the vehicle and making a charger. It's also about, if I buy an electric car today and 2 months later, my charging apparatus gets, you know, halted, what is the expenditure I have to make on getting it renovated, getting it started again? So these are very, very practical considerations that we must look into. If you're talking about public transportation, Gautam, if you're talking about, we're doing fairly well. Calcutta has got international acclaim and it hasn't come for nothing. We were given a lot of recognition by the IEA Paris this year. We got an award from C40 last year. And it's primarily because, you know why? I can tell you something very, very interesting today. Why has WTC been able to achieve exceptional results with electric vehicles? And the answer is our tramways. We conveniently forget the past. You know, we've been running tramways from 1873. And the Calcutta Tramway Company, which is a part of WTC now, has got exceptional electrical engineers. You have a workshop. You have people who have worked with electricity from decades. So we've been using this manpower to manage our EV apparatus. So when we use this manpower to run our EV apparatus, our manpower costs come down. And overall, you see that our operations are very efficient if you talk about the money spent and the money earned. And that is one of the reasons why we've been able to achieve a very successful EV public transportation in Calcutta. But if you talk about private vehicles, you know, private vehicles, people are not concerned about all these things. They are purely concerned about the ease of getting the vehicle, the price at which they'll get the vehicle, the cost of the charging, if it gets halted, in how much time can they get the vehicle repaired, and what will be the cost of the repair, and how much difficult it would be for them to repair it. You know, they have common. I talk to people across board. People don't even know how much a vehicle will run with charging. So I think we need to invest a lot of our energy on awareness. So I'll request Nick and I'll request Terry to please invest some sort of energy, fund, whatever, into awareness. You know, right now, people don't even know. You go on the road and do a survey, you ask people, what do they know about EV? Nothing. They do not even know how many kilometers can I run a car in one charging. They don't know the price of charging. They don't know where to get charging. So before you actually plan something, I think awareness generation is equally important. And yes, all of us have to work together in this. The power companies that are going to supply you electricity, the transport department that's going to give you incentives in terms of waivers of taxes, etc. The police that should know that this is also a car, the registration, then the maintenance, the private companies that are going to maintain and they're going to sell the car. So it's a huge ecosystem that we're talking about. And later on, you know, the future is you would have personal charging stations in homes, just like the way they are in the West. So in the West, or in many other countries, you know, people have personal charging stations in their garages, in their homes. So, you know, it's a multifarious sort of, you can say, movement. It cannot be done piecemeal. That today I talk about climate change, okay, tomorrow I talk about charging, then I do one webinar on thinking about how to run it. I think we got to work. So if I just summarize what I've said, I think if we need to make it a success, A, we have to think about the consumer. And the consumer wants the lowest cost and the maximum ease. B, we need to be holistic in our approach. We cannot think of one thing now and the other thing later. And C, because it's a multifarious thing, I think we need to take all stakeholders together so that the ecosystem is strong. Otherwise, it will come and it will fizzle down. So that's it from my side. I think you've discussed the technical part, and you're going to have more sessions in the coming 1 hour. I would stress on these 3 parts. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent, Mr. Kapoor. In fact, coming straight from Bangasagar, it only speaks about your passion and commitment to the cause. You have rightly said about the consumer. Ultimately, it is the consumer. And today's world, you have mentioned It is not only a person buying a car, electric vehicle, he will think about the maintenance, he will think about the charging stations, he will think about the cost of, running the car, he will think about the price, mileage, speeding up, convenience, comfort, branding, vintage, everything he will think about when he will go for opt for an e-vehicle. So we have to be prepared. At the same time, at the national level, on the holistic plan, there has to be manufacturing capability, regulation, policy, capability, a total solution, a planning infrastructure, skill, and also the awareness, rightly you have said. So unless we have satisfaction on the consumers meeting all their demands and a holistic approach at the policy level, it will be difficult. It will be difficult, whatever the ambitious plan may be. And that speaks for the ecosystem. And rightly said that we are also very proud of West Bengal Transport Corporation, who has become, who has been appreciated and acknowledged and received accolades for fast promoting the public vehicle, publicly e-vehicle. And that's probably the heritage, the tradition, the capability which they are carrying with the tramways. That is one of the outcome of that. Of course, there is another outcome which, with humbleness, Mr. Kapoor has not mentioned the leadership what Mr. Kapoor has given behind it. So, with this, we have listened to all the expert and the eminent speakers in the inaugural session. I would request Mrs. Hoibanti Poddar, Senior Energy, Climate Change and Urban Advisor, COP26, Zero Emission Vehicle Transition India Lead, Prosperity Team, UK Trade, Economic and Prosperity, to address the gathering with our vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presence and for the excellent moderation. And thank you to all our speakers for such passionate, electrifying, if I may say, and I'm stealing this word from Anirban, and hopeful addresses as we begin this year. We are really grateful to Mr. Kapoor, and I wanted to, acknowledge his presence first, because he was making time. He just came down from a very important engagement, and he was in a chopper while we started the event. So very big thank you to him for making time to be part of this forum and highlighting the importance of the robust integrated ecosystem and the importance of awareness to enhance the uptake of EVs. In fact, I would like to mention here that we are working with the Government of India, particularly with Niti Aayog, to on a web portal to raise awareness on electric mobility, and we are very hopeful that it is going to be a one of its kind, one-stop solution, shop-stop solution provider, so that consumer is able to understand the choices that he or she has. The reason that we are putting this forum together is that the actions that we take today in dialogue with the industries, with the businesses, the cities, the regions, the civil society organizations, this will determine the pace of global transition to zero emission vehicles. While the national context, the regional context, the local context may be different, the policy approaches may be different, but the transition will be faster and easier and lower cost for all if we work together. One of the key things that I wanted to highlight here is that Mr. Kapoor mentioned that it is all about consumers and it is about affordability. And today's session is just not about cars. We are also trying to cover the importance of the adoption of electric vehicles across all the entire ecosystem. Adoption of vehicles by government, by businesses, by aggregated taxi operators, by by consumers like consumers like us. So firstly, I would like to thank you for addressing us, and many thanks to Bengal Chamber for collaborating with us for the program in the run-up to COP26. Our gratitude to Mr. Debi Mukherjee, President of Bengal Chamber, for such a hopeful address, making the point that a rapid global transition to zero-emission vehicles is vital to meet the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and Paris Agreement on Climate. Our heartfelt gratitude to His Excellency Mr. Nick Lowe for taking time out of his busy schedule to set the tone for the event. Dignitaries today highlighted the importance of innovation and for addressing the challenges around charging infrastructure, range anxiety, importance of clear roadmap and policies to enhance the uptake. And so our thanks to Ms. Hannah from LEVC for putting these issues together so nicely and brilliantly, and highlighting the strategic role that the government can play, not only to trigger the innovation aspect, but also to bring about the behavioral changes that is so very much needed. Our sincere gratitude to Mr. Anirban Ghosh for his address, and for highlighting how globally and in India, Mahindra is taking a lead in fast transforming the way we would commute and we would do our business. We have a galaxy of speakers today to deliberate on ways how to enhance the pace of transition. Going forward, we are really looking forward to hearing from them, and we will use this forum to coordinate our efforts. We want to act together to overcome any strategic or technical barriers that may be there, and accelerate the production of the affordable zero-emission vehicles and increase economies of scale. So we're really hoping that through these deliberations and through more strategic conversation, we would be able to boost investment, bring down the costs, and increase the uptake of EVs, and the many economic, social, and environmental benefits that it will bring. So thank you very much for being with us, and over to the next session. Thanks.
Thank you, Heymanti. Thank you. You have made my task easier. I mean, beautiful summing up and extracted the real salient points out of the discussions. And as we are running little late, not wasting any time, because you all are eager to listen to the eminent speakers, I would hand over to Suchishmita to take it forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all the dignitaries present in the inaugural session. Thank you, British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata, for partnering with us. Thank you, our sponsor, RPG Power Trading Company Limited. Here we would like to play a video on clean transport before switching on to the next session.